You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And congratulations on having survived another week. But there's good news on the program today. My sole guest is a woman who herself is of indigenous ancestry in the Philippines and who speaks for indigenous peoples to the most powerful folks in the world, heads of government and state, and the United Nations itself. She has come from working for and with, as a grassroots organizer, indigenous women in the Cordilleras, the mountainous northern region of the Philippines, where years ago, spoiler alert, I met her, and where she brought me to one of the most consequential, meaningful meetings of my life, which I'll talk about later at the end of the program in fighting words. But it's an honor to have her here. And, of course, there's Surrealism Corner, and there's news. So before we do anything else, let's hold hands and jump inside the headlines. Trump loves branding people with nicknames. So why aren't we calling him Trump the Traitor and Traitor Trump? You know, on social media and everywhere else. Well, that's about the limit of my coverage on him today. It's all in the headlines anyway, while Mueller works inside the headlines, and we wait and organize. Here's a related sidebar, though. In case you were wondering why, after half a century, the U.S. Embassy to Israel was suddenly being moved from Tel Aviv to a violently provocative site in Jerusalem, you'll be interested to learn that the Congressional Leadership Fund, the GOP House Super PAC, filed its fundraising report, which showed, among other hair-raisers, 2 separate $15 million checks from arch-conservative, ultra-religious American hawks for Israel, Sheldon and Mariam Adelson. Sheldon is not so ultra-religious as not to have made his gazillions off gambling casinos. Speaking of which, banishing class actions tops the corporate legal agenda. Class actions, as you may know, are brought by individual plaintiffs on behalf of a much larger group of people allegedly damaged by the same wrong inflicted by the same defendant. Class actions are indispensable to folks of modest means who, as individuals, cannot afford to sue a well-funded corporation. In recent Supreme Court decisions that came perilously near to this corporate wish list legal ideal item, now retired Justice Anthony Kennedy functioned as a sort of slow-motion, mild brake against speed in undercutting class actions. There is no braking mechanism anymore. We've covered the restaurant workers' fight for one fair wage on this program before, but now there's some important new research. A 12-month study on the lifelong impact of sexual harassment in the restaurant industry has been released by ROC, R-O-C, Restaurant Opportunities Center United, and the University of California, Berkeley Food Labor Research Center. Between 1/3 and 1/2 of all Americans work in the restaurant industry as one of their first jobs, and the vast majority are female. Because the so-called other NRA, National Restaurant Association, almost as bad as the other one, lobbies against minimum wage legislation for restaurant workers. Because of that lobby, waitstaff have to rely on tips for survival, which in turn means being forced to endure sexual harassment and even assault. The findings of this research, called Take Us Off the Menu, revealed that a majority of women who previously worked as tip workers report tolerating harassment later in life, regardless of what professions they eventually enter. They're discouraged from recognizing these formative experiences as harassment, and they internalize this as a norm for acceptable workplace behavior. There are proven policy solutions to address this. States like California that have a one fair wage policy, which eliminates a lower wage for tipped workers, report about half the rate of sexual harassment in the restaurant industry than those states with a sub-minimum tipped wage. You can find out more about the study and about ROC at www.rocunited.org. Leonard Lopate, the WNYC radio host, was fired last year after investigations into allegations of inappropriate behavior toward multiple female colleagues. Now, shockingly, he has returned to New York radio with his own program on WBAI, which is owned by the Pacifica Foundation and is known for its so-called leftist-leaning programming. Lopate, 77, had been under investigation over the allegations for many months before WNYC and its owner, New York Public Radio, made the decision to fire him. But WBAI sought him out, and Berthold Reimers, WBAI general manager, stated publicly and shamefully, quote, "We are thrilled to have him at WBAI," close quote. You might want to drop WBAI a tweet or two. You cannot trust the skinheads on the right or the ponytailed guys on the left where sexism is concerned. But listeners' pressure is often effective. Even China, hardly known for its support of feminism, has done better than WBAI. Sun Yat-sen University has barred a professor from teaching now that students went public with sexual harassment allegations against him, after the university did not take action. This major university in the southern city of Guangzhou had received complaints against Professor Zhang Peng as early as April, when Me Too began emboldening current and former women students to denounce molestation. But the university dealt gently with the 40-year-old professor who's a rising star in the field of primatology. They dealt with him through an internal disciplinary process. Even after 4 students plus a female teacher lodged formal complaints against him in May, they did nothing. Only after a Chinese journalist, Han Qiuqin, reported that the professor had forcibly grabbed and kissed women, then the university acted. The school did not mention any duration for the ban, however, and the women are not satisfied. For more context on this, check out my exclusive interview with Chinese feminist activist Liang Xiaowen on the June 10th episode 251 of Women's Media Center Live. You can find it in the archives on WMCLive.com or on your favorite podcast platforms. Same subject, new abuse report. The head of Shambhala Buddhism, Mipham Rinpoche, known as Sakyong, a Tibetan word that means king, presides over a network of more than 200 Buddhist outposts in over 30 countries, where thousands come for training in meditation. Shambhala International is one of the largest Buddhist organizations in the West. But in late June, a former Shambhala teacher released a report alleging that the Sakyong had sexually abused and exploited his most devoted female followers for years, and that senior leaders at Shambhala, an organization whose motto is making enlightened society possible, knew of the misconduct and covered it up. The Sakyong has apologized for his, quote, relationships with women in the community, some of whom shared experiences of feeling harmed as a result, close quote. Shambhala groups around the world, fortunately, are demanding more action. This is not the first time a Tibetan Buddhist leader in the West has been so accused. Last year, a monastery leader and founder in upstate New York, was forced to retire after such allegations, as was the author of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, who was accused of decades of sexual assaults and violent rage. Sickeningly, none of these criminal hypocrites have been formally charged and gone to trial and jail. Shambhala Buddhism seems particularly vulnerable to this kind of behavior. The organization was founded by this king's father, whose alcoholic exploits and womanizing were well known and were affectionately termed, quote, crazy wisdom. In between him and his son, Shambhala was led by an American-born Buddhist who is mainly remembered for having sex with students even after he knew he was infected with HIV/AIDS. One really despairs about the emotional gullibility and the spiritual desperation of people who seek enlightenment in such cultist victimization. But bravo for Andrea Wynne, the woman behind the expose. She grew up in the Shambhala community in Halifax, and she says that she and many other children were sexually abused by adults in the community. And where is the head of Tibetan Buddhism on all this? Where is the Dalai Lama? Hello? Silence means consent. Seoul, South Korea, has witnessed its largest women-only rally ever. Some 60,000 women gathered there on July 9th to protest men using hidden cameras to spy on women. According to authorities, there were 5,185 criminal cases involving use of hidden cameras in 2016, the last year data was available. That number more than tripled since 2011, when there were 1,523 cases. Hidden cameras have been found in public bathrooms, in swimming pool shower stalls, and even in motels. Still images and videos then have appeared online in forums and on pornographic websites. Women at the rally held signs reading, "Don't turn my life into pornography." Elsewhere in Seoul on the same day, a separate rally for the decriminalization of abortion took place, with around 5,000 people in a protest organized by 16 feminist organizations. They marched to the Constitutional Court, which had upheld criminalization of abortion in 2012 after a 4-4 tie vote. And last, to end with a wee bit of a smile, Ireland's lower house of Parliament has passed a bill that requires the country's sovereign fund, valued at about $10.4 billion, to end investment in fossil fuels. The bill has the support of Prime Minister Leo Varadkar and is expected to become law. When it does, Ireland will become the first country in the world to formally pledge divestment from fossil fuels. After recent referenda passing marriage equality for same-sex partners and the legalization of abortion, and a planned referendum to end Catholic Church-imposed anti-blasphemy law, Ireland is just charging ahead to make up for lost time and to become the new, hey, let's outdo Scandinavia, progressive beacon of Europe. This particular environmentally sane decision gives new meaning to the wearing of the green. It's time for a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back directly with the Surrealism Corner.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back, straight into the Surrealism Corner. I know that you will be as ecstatic as I am to learn that there is no more poverty in the United States. Isn't that just great? Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisers declared as much, announcing that the country's long-running war on poverty, quote, is largely over and a success, close quote. The council was making the case for imposing new work requirements on Americans who benefit from federal safety net programs, most of whom, as you know, are women with small children. The report went on to say that expanding work requirements will improve self-sufficiency, because it's common knowledge, that single moms are lazy slobs who understand nothing about self-sufficiency. So this just might be the place to report that the New York Times business section recommends that women should work longer and retire later, I would add, if permitted, because a new National Institute on Retirement Security report has found that retired women are 80% more likely to live in poverty than men. Oh, those old women, they must be hallucinating. There is no more poverty. In the dubious victories, but what the hell, why not, department, Brianna Daniels, age 24, is the first African-American woman to work a pit crew in NASCAR's top series. She changes tires. She says it breaks down barriers and opens doors for other people who look like her. Together with Brianna O'Leary, age 26, Brianna is half of the first female duo in the modern era to work in a pit crew together at a cup race. She's a graduate of NASCAR's Drive for Diversity program, the goal of which is to broaden the sport's fan base. Suspected there was a monetary motive in there somewhere, did you? Still, congratulations to Brianna and Brianna, dynamic duo. You might remember our recent coverage of female musicians at the New York Philharmonic pressing to wear black slacks during evening performances instead of mandatory floor-length gowns. Well, apparently that issue just skirts an even deeper problem. The top flautist of the Boston Symphony Orchestra has filed a gender pay discrimination suit against the ensemble, claiming her compensation is only 75% that of her closest comparable colleague, the orchestra's principal oboist, who is a man. Elizabeth Rowe, the orchestra's principal flute player, and one of its most prominent musicians, is the first to use a new law in Massachusetts requiring equal pay for comparable work. Hooray! That's a concept feminists have been fighting for decades. Hers is also the first pay equity lawsuit brought by a leading orchestral musician, suggesting that the debate over gender equality in male-dominated classical music may be moving into new territory. Half a century after the introduction of blind auditions, in which candidates are heard from behind the screen to avoid discrimination, women still make up just over 47% of players in American ensembles. Under the Ain't It Awesome subhead, a report in the journal Science of big cosmic news. 4 billion years after a distant black hole erupted a powerful jet of radiation containing tiny elusive neutrinos, also known as ghost particles. Don't you love it? Sensors at Earth's South Pole have detected one of these particles. The discovery involved more than 1,000 researchers around the globe working together, which itself is a sign of hope for humanity. Cosmologists say that this work ushers in a new era of astronomy in which scientists can use neutrinos and ordinary light to learn more about our universe. Back down here on Earth, the unearthing of something awesome. There's a whole new henge, this time in Ireland. Yeah, you heard right, a new henge, an ancient circle. Signs of a 5,000-year-old monument suddenly reappeared in an Irish field outside of Dublin after an unusually brutal drought, a series of discolorations in the farmland caused by differences in soil spread about 150 meters wide in a perfectly circular pattern. The farmland is in an area archaeologically noted as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so this is no hoax. The monument would not have been stone, as in Stonehenge, but timber. Large timber posts hold more residual moisture, and the timber would have rotted away over time, but the soil would maintain its differences. The site would have been large enough to hold a few thousand Neolithic people for rituals relating to spirituality and/or astronomical observation. Under a new set of laws, children in low-income immigrant neighborhoods in Denmark, which the government there calls ghettos, will be mandatorily separated from their families for at least 25 hours a week for instruction in so-called Danish values. These apparently include Christmas, Easter, and the Danish language. Families that do not comply could have their welfare payments cut off. Now, look, I get the part about the Danish language, but the rest, and especially the mandatory separation and punitive threat, are in the WTF category. Certainly better than separating families on entry, as we're doing here in the States, but I expect better from Denmark. In Denmark, during World War II, virtually all Danish citizens, following the example set by King Christian X, voluntarily wore yellow stars so the Nazi occupiers would be unable to differentiate who were the Jews. What's in a name is becoming more important, and that's all to the good, although I'd like to see policy action over pay equity, physical safety, and a few other little items become as popular. Just as the honorific Ms. took off in the U.S. during the 1970s, what was then West Germany's interior minister banned the use of Fraulein in 1972. In 2009, the European Parliament recommended using gender-neutral terms in place of words like sportsman and statesman. In 2012, France ordered mademoiselle banished from government forms and registries after a public feminist campaign highlighted the term as suggesting female subjugation. As I say, all to the good, but sticks and stones still hurt our bones. And last, an item that my lower self insists on including, although it's probably very tasteless since it involves someone's death. But I cannot help it. A tourist in India, the report did not say what was his country of origin, but a tourist in India was mauled to death when he tried to take a selfie with a wounded bear. Now, I'm truly sorry that he was mauled to death, but this selfie thing has really gotten out of hand, don't you think? And anyone who would try to take a selfie with a bear, a wounded bear yet, kind of is asking for, well, I'll just leave it there. Surreal. Time for another short pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and if you ever have got caught up in the who is more oppressed than who game, which itself is an absurd and cruel pastime, it's arguable that Indigenous peoples, and among them certainly women and children, have the award-winning crown on suffering. Everybody's marched over them. And the person who speaks for them in their voice to the world is my next guest. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again. Victoria Tauli-Corpuz is a development consultant and an international indigenous activist of Kankanai Igorot ethnicity. On June 2nd of 2014, she assumed responsibilities as the third UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As United Nations Special Rapporteur, she is tasked to investigate alleged violations of Indigenous peoples' rights and to promote the implementation of international standards concerning the rights of Indigenous peoples. She's also the Indigenous and Gender Advisor to the Third World Network and a member of the United Nations Development Program Civil Society Organizations Advisory Committee. She was the first recipient of the Gabriela Silang Award, conferred in 2009 by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples. She served as chairperson of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues from 2005 to 2010, and she was the rapporteur for the Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Populations. As an activist, she has worked in the rice paddies with the women of the Philippines who are Indigenous women. And she's come from that place to work now with heads of state all over the world to better the status of Indigenous women and men. Full disclosure, listeners, she is a dear old friend from the trenches and from the rice paddies of Asia. It is my honor and great pleasure to welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Vicky Tauli-Corpuz. Vicky, dear, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. God, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. Finally.
Finally, I lost you. I lost you for about 30 years, but finally we have refound each other. My God, you have been doing impressive things since I last saw you, and you were doing impressive things back then. I will never forget the voyage that we took under your direction and guidance up into the Philippines Cordilleras, the mountainous region, to meet with the Indigenous women, the Igoro and the Ifugao and the Kalinga.
Yes.
And the Kalinga.
Yes.
And as I recall, the Kalinga had a particular reverence for women and a great respect.
Oh, yes. Definitely. The women play very key leadership roles as well.
But also, you come from the Igoro people, and the Igoro people, those were the women who stopped the Chico Valley Project Dam, didn't they? I'm remembering.
Both the Igorot women in Sadanga as well as the Kalinga women in Bugnay and Tulgao. They were the ones who did. Yeah.
Tell that story. I remember it is such a wonderful story.
Yeah. Well, in the late in the early 1970s, we got word about a dam project that was going to be built in our rivers, in the Chico River. And we never knew about it, but people just discovered that there were some strange men going to the rivers and doing some kind of survey. And it was only after we got information from the churches, actually, that there's a World Bank project that was being funded under the Marcos dictatorship that will dam 4 areas along the Chico River, and this will cause the displacement of 300,000 people, and of course the drowning of the rice terraces as well as the burial sites of the indigenous peoples along those rivers. So
yes.
We mounted a campaign against it, but the women in those communities in the place where we went, Bulwang, and then Butuagan, as well as in the other parts in Kalinga, they decided to lead the resistance against the dam. And so when the engineers were setting up the dams, and there were a lot of military men who were protecting them, the women went to the areas where they are, and they bared their breasts. It's for the indigenous women, the women along Kalinga as well as in Bontoc. Bearing your breasts before men is like a sign of disdain.
Yes,
that you are not allowed to even step into those territories. So that was the way they did it, and the men got scared, So, so that was how it all started, And then, of course, their men, the Kalinga men as well as the Kanokanda Igorot men, they all were behind in the back, trying to see whether these engineers or in the military are going to react violently. But with that first salvo, they managed to drive them away. Of course, they kept coming back, afterwards, but it was the women who started the resistance.
Yes, and eventually even the World Bank had to cave in before brave, bare-breasted women. I love this story.
Yeah, exactly.
I've told this story all over the world, and I've also told about the way you led me with terror in my mouth and my heart and my gut across this. I don't know how to describe it. This hellish rope bridge above a deep, thousands and thousands of feet deep cavern as we were going to visit the women who work in the rice paddies. And I was going to do anything. I was going to crawl to get there if necessary. But my heart was not only in my mouth, it was hovering above my head. And there you were just trouncing across this rope bridge. And you kept saying, just don't look down, Robin. Just don't look down. And
yeah, exactly.
And I thought, I can't even move my eyes, let alone look anywhere. But when we got there was that amazing meeting with Gunawa in her hut, and there were the women who worked in the rice paddies, and the way that the extraordinary the rice paddies in the terraces of Banaway, I remember, that spell out messages. Talk about those.
Yeah. Well, yes. That's the main livelihood of the indigenous peoples in our territories, and the women are the main food producers. So they are the ones who exactly have the knowledge in terms of planting rice and keeping the soil fertile.
Yes.
The men, of course, build the terraces. But the women are the ones who nurture those terraces, and they are the ones who also know all the varieties of the different rice varieties that can be used whenever there are some droughts or when it's too much water. They know. They have the knowledge about what kinds of varieties they will be planting in their rice fields. Yes. So basically, they're the repository of the knowledge on how to nurture and produce rice, and they are the ones, they transmit this to their younger generations as well. But I think that's one of the main reasons why they fought back against the dam, because they said, if there's a dam and all our fields are going to be drowned, then how will we live?
Right.
And of course, all our rituals are also very much linked to the production cycle. We do rituals before we plant, when we weed, after we harvest.
Of course.
So all the kinds of sacred rituals are related very much to the way we plant the rice and take care of this.
But with all those considerations, still to have the sophistication and the skill to plant the rice in messages, even in English, so that when you're driving on the 2-lane highway miles and miles away, you look out and you see. I thought I was hallucinating at first. You see the word. You see the words revolution and love. Love.
Exactly.
Suddenly appearing along the mountainside, and I remember saying to you, "What am I? Is that? No? You said yes. That's revolution and that's love." And the women plant them in patterns, and there were also, sort of spiral patterns, very beautiful.
Yes,
and
exactly. When it's the fallow period before to let the terraces rest, they plant the sweet potato in spiral patterns. Because that's the way that they ensure the fertility, So they sort of alternate between planting rice and planting sweet potato.
Right, how brilliant! Yes, that's incredible wisdom. And you were, as I recall, there was the Cordilleras, which is the mountain chain, the Cordilleras Women Education and Resource Center, and it was based in Baguio City, but it actually functioned in the remote villages. And you were the founder and the director of that, and we were both much younger then.
It's 1987, isn't it?
Yes, it's in late 80s. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. When we had this Sisterhood is Global conference in Manila.
That's correct. Yes, and we were able. I remember fundraising together with Analia de Leon to bring 6 international members of the Sisterhood is Global Institute.
Exactly.
My NGO there for 10 days, and we spent time in Manila, and then we split up into the different regions. Some went to Mindanao, and some went to Negros, and I had gone in earlier specifically to go to the Cordilleras.
Yeah, that's right. It came before the conference.
That's right. I remember meeting with that extraordinary doctor, Dr. Geraldine. Dr. Geraldine. She was one doctor being the physician for 250,000 people. I remember. Yes. It was incredible. Incredible. Yeah. And I remember asking her what did she need, and she smiled and began to laugh somewhat hysterically. And she said, everything. So when I got home, I sent boxes and boxes of, basics, Band-Aids and bandages and aspirin. And what amazing women. So there you were, being the head of the Women's Center and the co-founder for local women's groups. And here you are now being the Special Rapporteur at the United Nations for all Indigenous Peoples.
Yeah, I have been the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I was appointed to this post in 2014 by the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And my mandate is to investigate the situations of human rights of Indigenous peoples in all over the world. Of course, I do this by visiting countries. I do official country visits where I stay in a country for 10 days and I go to the villages of Indigenous peoples. I always make sure that I have specific meetings with Indigenous women. And then I make a report before the Human Rights Council. Now, I also receive allegations of human rights violations from anybody who have whose rights were violated, the Indigenous women, the Indigenous peoples in general. And then I communicate to the government on what to ask whether it's true and what are they doing about these issues, no? And so it's and then I make some thematic studies. The second thematic study I did was on Indigenous women and girls because the 2 previous rapporteurs were men, so they didn't dare to go venture into looking at Indigenous women situation.
Right. They didn't know.
So that's what I do, basically.
Oh my God! Is the news from just being a sort of civilian here? The news seems pretty bad. Whether it's for the Sami people in Scandinavia or the Amazonian people along the river, or any of the peoples in Africa or Southeast Asia, or in the United States,
even in Canada,
in the United States,
and murdered. Yeah.
That's right.
Even in the United States, I visited the United States last year.
Yes.
And I look at the situation of the Indigenous women, especially in the areas where oil extraction is happening.
Of course.
And there's a lot of trafficking as well as a lot of course, violence against women in those areas where the man camps are set up.
Yes, yes. What is there anything hopeful going on anywhere that I can hang on to?
Well, there are, there are. In fact, that's the beauty of this mandate, because I do get a chance to also meet with the people who are fighting back. Many of the fights against mining or oil extraction or deforestation, these are really Indigenous peoples, because their territories are the last remaining territories where all these resources are found.
I know.
So, but what I have seen in several countries, like I was in Mexico, there are autonomous municipalities, where the indigenous peoples have driven out the drug cartels and the politicians are in cahoots with them.
Wow.
And they set up their own authorities. They elected their own people. This has happened, for instance, in Shiran. In fact, the women were the ones who led the struggle here, because they were fed up with these loggers who were destroying their forests and the drug cartels coming in to recruit their kids. So the women started to protest, and they started burning, the tires to barricade the trucks that were coming in to get the logs.
Yes.
And then it was after the women acted that the men came in to support them. But you know what they did? They kicked out all the municipal officials. They said you cannot be the officials anymore. And then they elected their own people. And then the electoral tribunal filed a case against them, and they won. The indigenous peoples won. The Supreme Court also they brought the case to the Supreme Court, and they won again because Mexico has a law that allows for indigenous peoples governance. So that's really fascinating for me.
Yes.
That they are able to now that they can brag that their community, they have better well-being, they have peace and security. And I asked the government officials about this. I said, is it true? Do the indicators show that they are in a much better situation? And they said, yes, actually.
Yes, of course. Isn't that brilliant? And also I love it because of the vicious stereotype about indigenous peoples being primitive and being savage. And in fact, they exercised real democracy.
Exactly.
Unlike this fake pseudo-democracy that had been imposed on them.
Exactly.
It's a wonderful, encouraging story.
It is.
Tell what's about the Philippines, my dear, because that's not such a happy story right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, in the Philippines, of course, we also face the same situation where a lot of these mining companies coming from the U.S., from Canada are invading our territories, as well as agribusiness corporations like palm oil plantations. They encroach into the territories of indigenous people. So recently, there has been a lot of displacement of indigenous peoples, from the areas which the government wanted to be mined.
Yeah.
And I spoke out strongly against this in my capacity as the rapporteur because there were indigenous peoples being displaced from their territories and some were killed. And so I made it to the news.
Nice.
And then shortly after, that was a statement I made in December. Then in February of this year, I discovered that there is a petition being filed by the Department of Justice to label or prescribe the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army as a terrorist organization. That petition, they had 600 names, many of which are John Does and aliases, but they have also names of people, and my name was included in the list.
Oh yes,
no?
you're a well-known terrorist.
Exactly.
Oh, Vicky. Oh,
yeah.
God.
So I protested. I said that this is really a retaliation against the statements I made against the government. And of course the UN spoke up and said that I have immunity and privileges as a UN independent expert. But in the end, my lawyers advised me to sort of make myself, to leave for a while because they said, it's good. You have the immunity and all that, but we don't stay in a country where there's a rule of law.
Yeah.
And there are, in a context where extrajudicial killings are happening left and right.
Yes.
We cannot assure that you will not be subjected to something like that. So I had to leave in March, which was a good reason because I was going to Geneva anyhow. But that is what happened. There is now they
Vicky.
haven't withdrawn the petition, so we are at high risk of either being arrested under the National Security Act. This is the anti-terrorism law, which if you are arrested, is non-bailable and you will be in jail for at least 7 years. Yeah. For pre-trial, and then you can also be, of course, you can also be subjected to these so-called death squads that
Yes,
the
of
president
course.
has set
Of
up.
course,
You know,
of course. It's
So
terrifying.
that's
It's terrifying, and it's meant to be terrifying. Recently, the crusading Filipino journalist Maria Ressa was on the program here, and she was she was wonderful. And they're of course trying to imprison her. They called her a terrorist, trying to shut down the press. It's a terrifying time. Well, my dear, we have to keep you safe, and if necessary, we'll get you a curly-haired red wig and smuggle you around, from country to country, because you are a valuable, great international resource for women and other living things. And I love you dearly. I thank you for everything you have done and are doing and will do. And I thank you for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you very much, Robin. And it's good to touch base with you again after so many years. So hopefully this is not going to be the last time.
No, it definitely will not. When you're here again in the fall, we will connect at last.
Yes, thank you.
We have to take one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. These days we struggle hour by hour, week by week, against despair, feeling lost. We don't know where we are, so we can't figure out where we're going. It was a little over 30 years ago I first met Tauli-Corpuz in the mountainous north region of the Philippines called the Cordilleras. I wrote about that trip and Vicky in my book of essays, The Word of a Woman. But this is the first time I have shared any of that writing here. The region has a single 2-lane highway that weaves through a countryside of wild beauty, now a metaphoric and literal battlefield. Logging industries for export to Japan gash the hillside forests. Half-built schools and community centers stand as mute testimony to abandoned development schemes in the midst of villages subsisting in a depression of extreme poverty. Here, as in similar villages throughout the world, I'm told the women don't work. And here, as in similar villages throughout the world, the men sit drinking cheap beer in the local lean-to of a tavern, staring with lackluster eyes, while the women seem to never stop moving except to nurse an infant at the breast. Otherwise, they're selling meager wares, handicrafts, weavings, baskets in a small marketplace, or carrying loaded pots or baskets on their heads or backs, or squatting beside open cook fires, or bending over the rice paddies through which they wade, ankle-deep in water, or hunching above mountain streams, pounding laundry clean with rocks and their fists. In every activity, each woman is usually surrounded by 3 or more children, stair-stepped in age, hungrily clamoring for attention. The Cordillera Women's Education and Resource Center is based in the little city of Baguio, but actually functions out in the remote villages of the region. Baguio is the site of the Japanese community and the place from whence many of the Filipina mail-order brides are recruited, a tragically high number of whom are destined for sex tourism brothels. The center's co-founder and director, Tauli-Corpuz, A fierce woman, warm, and as short as I am, 5 feet, manages to publish a little news journal on the activities of local women and women's groups, but most of the center's energy is spent on taking its humble programs, primarily literacy and advocacy, into the hills and rice paddies. We go out together, Vicky and I. We go to one of the tiny rice paddy villages, actually a cluster of 6 open-sided huts. It's a day's trek, first by minibus from Bontoc, then by foot, hiking down one steep hillside across a very intimidating rope bridge over the river and a canyon far beneath, up the other steep hillside, onto a plateau, and along the thin strips of earth, tightrope style, 1 foot in front of the other, that divide the paddies. At last we sit on the mud floor of one of the huts, drinking peanut coffee from a shared tin cup. Most urban Filipinas speak English, and some also speak Spanish and or Chinese. The city women speak only a little Filipino, Tagalog, the language of the so-called common people. The tribal people of the north have their own languages and dialects. A woman translates. Gunawa, the woman in whose hut we sit, comes from a family of peasants who have lived on this land for centuries. She is the mother of 7 children, many of whom crowd around us, their huge, liquidly beautiful black eyes staring as we speak. She's in her 30s, but she looks like a woman in her 60s. Her teeth are rotting, her skin, tanned to leather, is stretched across a gaunt frame. But her eyes, they gleam with intelligence. She is proud that her children are learning to read. A woman comes as often as possible, sometimes once a week, from Vicky's Woman's Center to teach them. Her greatest regret is that she herself never learned to read or write. We talk about her dreams for a better life. The longing in Gunawa's soft voice is clear even before the translation reaches me through another woman's voice. What did she want more than anything? To learn to read, comes the quiet refrain. Not more food, better housing, some easing of her intense labor? No, Gunawa insists, with dignity and force, to read. To read. Because, you see, she continues, a shy smile flickering across her weather-beaten face, because someday I might go somewhere. I have never left this village, but I hear that there are roads, and I hear there are signs on the roads. If I could read the signs, I could know where I was. If I could read the signs, I would know where I was going. Later that afternoon, high above the canyon and the river, each of us clutching at the ropes of the swaying bridge, Vicky shouts to me that somehow, some way, she will find the funds to start an adult literacy program for Gunawa and the women of this rice paddy. And she did. But I have never forgotten Gunawa, because we all of us need to know where we are, so we can all of us know where we're going. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. You can also stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast at iTunes, at Stitcher, and at Google Play. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. My latest book, Dark Matter, New Poems, is available online and off wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.